Welcome to Plain English, the podcast that goes at the right speed for English language learners. Listen now and read the transcript online at plainenglish.com. Now, here's Jeff, your host for today's episode.
The Winter Olympics have begun in South Korea. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff, and you are listening to Plain English, the podcast that goes at just the right speed for English language learners. Today is Thursday, February 15th, 2018. I hope you had a nice Valentine's Day yesterday. Today's episode is about the Olympics in PyeongChang, and we'll talk a little bit about the region it's in, what the opening ceremonies were like, and a few other details about the games. In the second half of the show, I'll show you how to use the English phrase, third time's the charm. Don't forget that you can read along as you listen. The full transcript of today's episode is available on the website plainenglish.com. Today is episode 21, so the URL is easy to remember, plainenglish.com/21, plainenglish.com/21, and you will see the full transcript. If you speak Spanish, French, Portuguese, or Chinese, you have to check out the website because we've got translations of all the tough words and phrases. So you can listen, read along, and when you get to a word you don't know, it shows you the definition instantly in your language so you never have to stop. So that's for Spanish, Portuguese, French, and Chinese speakers. The URL once more, plainenglish.com/21. So with that out of the way, let's get started on the main part of today's episode. Are you watching the Olympics this year? The world's eyes are turned to PyeongChang, South Korea, the host of these Olympics. The third time was the charm for PyeongChang, which beat out France and Germany on its third bid for the Winter Olympics. So what do we know about PyeongChang? It's actually not a city, but a county in South Korea, about 80 miles from the capital city, Seoul, and only 60 miles from the demilitarized zone that separates North and South Korea. It's in a somewhat rugged, mountainous area in the Taebaek Mountains. Only about 45,000 people live in the whole county, making PyeongChang the smallest host since Lillehammer, Norway, in 1994. Although PyeongChang is the host, some events will be held in the coastal city of Gangneung and a nearby county of Gyeongsun. The area is known as the Happy 700 because it's about 700 meters above sea level, which they say is the optimal altitude for the well-being of humans and animals. It provides good snow for winter sports, but a moderate climate in the summer. Hard to argue with that, right? You may have seen the mascot for this year's games, a white tiger named Surang. A white tiger is symbolic of a guardian in Korean culture. The opening ceremonies took place last Friday at PyeongChang Olympic Stadium, a temporary venue that holds about 35,000 people. The ceremony was relatively quick, at just over 2 hours, and somewhat simple. But that seemed appropriate considering it was outside and really cold. The challenge for the hosts is to translate a message of the games into a ceremony that can be understood across cultures and languages. This year's ceremony showed a journey of 5 children through space and time, featuring flying trains, self-driving cars, surgery, and letters flying off a page. A children's chorus sung the South Korean national anthem. I only saw the clips, but most reviews were generally favorable. One funny moment in the opening ceremonies came during the Parade of Nations. If you've ever watched this part, it's kind of interesting to see all the athletes march into the stadium with the flags of their countries, but it tends to be long and kind of boring after a while. After Greece starts, all the other countries come in alphabetical order. And when it was Tonga's turn, Tonga is a small island nation in the Pacific. When it was Tonga's turn, a familiar face came out. That familiar face was Pita Tafatofua, who actually marched in the parade shirtless, just as he did in the Summer Olympics in Brazil, only this time in the freezing weather. In Rio, he competed in Taekwondo. This time, he qualified as a cross-country skier. Interesting for a nation that may never have seen snow. I thought for sure he would be the first athlete to compete in both the Summer and Winter Olympics, but boy was I wrong. He's actually the 138th athlete to do that. I'm not sure how far Pita is going to get in cross-country skiing since he just barely qualified, but I'll be watching. What sports do you like watching the most? There are 102 total events in 15 sport disciplines, like sport groupings. Personally, I like downhill skiing, bobsledding, and speed skating. Over the last few days, I actually was watching some snowboarding. I had never watched snowboarding at the Olympics before, but it is fun to watch. And a 17-year-old from the United States took a gold medal on Saturday. I don't know what all of you were doing when you were 17 years old, but he's definitely doing more than I was at that age. It's fun to see what all the different nations are good at. The Dutch are good at speed skating, the Austrians at alpine skiing. The Americans and Russians always seem to be good at figure skating, and Canada, of course, at ice hockey. Norway stands out, at least to me, for some of the long, hard winter sports like cross-country skiing and biathlon. Actually, Norway has the most medals of any country in Winter Olympics history. And speaking of medals, each Olympics has a unique medal design. That's something I didn't know until today. The medal design this year has diagonal lines that resemble the texture of tree trunks, in a nod to PyeongChang's location in a rural region. The medals hang on teal and red ribbons embroidered with designs from the Korean alphabet. The Winter Olympics last until February 25th. Before we get to our word this week, I wanted to ask all of you a quick favor. Especially those of you listening on the Apple Podcasts app. There are a lot of new people listening on the Apple Podcasts app lately, and that's great. The reason is that Plain English is showing up in more search results, so more people know about the program. So here's the favor I want to ask of you. If you listen to Apple Podcasts, go in the app and click on subscribe so that new episodes show up automatically in your app. If you do that, Apple will see and suggest Plain English to even more listeners in the future. The phrase I selected today is third time's the charm, which appeared at the beginning of today's episode. PyeongChang bid unsuccessfully for both the 2010 and 2014 Olympics, but they finally won on their third try for these 2018 Olympics. For PyeongChang, the third time was the charm, meaning they tried twice before, didn't make it, but they did make it on their third try. A physical charm is something that has magic power. You can also say something or someone is charming if it's nice, delightful, or makes you feel good. So it's common in English to say the third time's the charm when you've tried something twice, failed twice, and then succeeded on the third try. I did a quick Google News search for this phrase and came up with lots of recent results in Google News, which means that the phrase is pretty common in the media. Here are a few examples from the news this week. The third time was the charm for Terrell Owens. He was a famous American football player who was elected to the Football Hall of Fame on his third try. He didn't get enough votes to join the Hall of Fame in either of his first 2 years of eligibility, but for T.O., the third time was the charm. He got in this year. Will the third time be the charm for going to the moon? Donald Trump became the third U.S. president to call for astronauts to return to the moon. Though 2 previous presidents also proposed sending astronauts back to the moon, neither effort was successful. Will this third time be the charm? I kind of doubt it, but you never know. Here's something to know about this phrase. You never say the first or second time is the charm. The only time you would use a number higher than 3 is if you wanted to joke a little bit about how many times you needed to succeed. So with that in mind, here's a funny example. It's a headline from the New York Times. It says, 43rd time's the charm. Caroline Wozniacki wins her first major title. Caroline Wozniacki is a tennis player, and she won her first major tennis championship after 10 years on the tour. This was her 43rd major tournament and her first win. So now you understand why that headline is funny. The 43rd time was the charm for Caroline Wozniacki when she won the Australian Open tennis tournament last month. Caroline Wozniacki, by the way, is one of my favorite tennis players, and I was really happy to see her win the Australian Open last month. That's all for today. I hope you have a chance to catch some of the Olympics over the next week or so. Don't forget to click subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts, or follow if you're on Spotify, so you never miss an episode. We'll be back with another edition of Plain English on Monday, when we'll talk about the new fan-created Harry Potter movie. Don't miss it. See you then.